Does anybody remember this show? It was about Arnold, one of the most optimistic kids 90s cartoons had ever seen. And it also starred Arnold's bully and obsessive lover, Helga Pataki. If any of you have seen Hey Arnold, we all know that Helga was a school bully. She even bullied all the other bullies. She was nobody to mess around with and she was always in charge. She was mean to everyone, but at the same time, she had a secret crush on Arnold. And watching this show, you would often ask yourself, why is she so obsessed with Arnold? Or why is she so mean to everybody? But it's not like she's a bad person because we've seen her do good before in the show. When people like Arnold, a person who can see the best in everybody, even notices that there's good and kindness within Helga, but she chooses to be angry and malicious. So I found myself asking, why is Helga so mad? Why is she so obsessed with Arnold? So let's take this second to do a deep dive on the psychology of Helga Pataki. I guess I have to say, spoilers for Hey Arnold if you haven't seen this show. Again, I don't know what rock you're living under, but you should probably go and check it out. And let's get into it. So, on the surface, Helga seems like a very basic and one-dimensional character. We see her bully all the other kids at school. We see her bully even the bullies like Harold. But we also see that she has very strong feelings toward Arnold. She both loves him and she's both angered by him. The question is, why? While a professional psychologist may be able to diagnose Helga with some mental disorder, before we even go into that, we're going to take the time to look at her childhood, because that's a time where you form your perceptions about the world and affects you the most going throughout your life. The show makes looking at Helga's early childhood life easy for us because of the episode Helga on the Couch. She visits a child psychologist for the first time. And in this episode, we see her recount her early childhood years growing up in her household. So if we look at how her family treats her, we can see that she's often a neglected child. Her dad is a workaholic who's only obsessed with his business, and her mom is a parent who is not actually present in Helga's life very often. The show
Notice you?
My mom? My mom wouldn't notice me if I was an alien pod person chanting Hare Krishna and spitting nickels.
even alludes to her having an alcoholic problem. And then both parents are focused on Helga's older sister, who is seen as more successful and smarter. So how does this lack of attention affect Helga's growth? Well, for one, we see it makes her more independent. From a young age, she was taking care of herself, looking out for herself because she knows her parents aren't going to do it for her, which is why she's so independent and so in charge in many different situations. But this lack of attention that she receives from her family is a driving force for her anger towards other kids at school. Many times we see her get aggressive with other kids. This could be seen as a call for attention that she hasn't gotten when she was a younger child, and it's also a way for her to displace her anger that she has towards her family but onto other people or other things. But this doesn't seem to explain her obsession with Arnold. The reason she's obsessed with Arnold is because he's one of the first few people to show her kindness and compassion without her having to act out for it. But then does this also answer why Helga is so smart and so driven? This does explain why Helga is so smart for a child her age. Having to do so much for herself from a young age means that she had to grow up faster. So even though her mental age isn't the same as her chronological age, because she had to learn a lot to be able to take care of herself and not rely on other people. And her intelligence and insightfulness can also be product of trying to measure up to her perfect older sister, who her parents only seem to notice.
It's annoying. Try having a sister that's perfect.
Perfect? What do you mean perfect?
Well, she gets straight A's at Bennington College. All the boys want to go out with her, but she's got to stay home and practice the piano for the Brandenburg concerto she's giving at the orphanage this weekend.
And her intelligence could be a cause of her trying to get her parents' attention by trying to be like her older sister, who is perfect in their eyes. So, is that it? Is that all there is to Helga Pataki? No, because there are some things that we cannot speak on. But we know that she has an obsessive disorder. There are many other disorders that child psychologists would diagnose her with, or that she's leaning towards. One of these disorders would be oppositional defiant disorder. And to be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, a person would have to meet at least 4 of these symptoms. Often loses temper, is often touchy or easily annoyed, is often angry and resentful, argues with authority figures, or for children and adolescents with adults, often actively defies or refuses to comply with the requests of authority figures or with rules, often deliberately annoys others, often blames others for his or her mistakes or misbehaviors, has been spiteful or vindictive at least twice in the past 6 months, which Helga meets at least 4 of these, maybe even more. Another disorder that she's leaning towards is antisocial personality disorder. And to be diagnosed with this disorder, you would have to meet at least 3 of the following criteria: failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, deceitfulness, impulsivity, or failure to plan ahead, irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults, reckless disregard for safety of self or others, consistent irresponsibility, which is shown by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior, lack of remorse, which is shown by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt or stolen from another person, which Helga probably meets at least 3 of these criteria. But to be diagnosed with this, the person has to be at least 18 years old. But with Helga being so young, I wouldn't diagnose her with antisocial personality disorder. Another thing that a psychologist would diagnose her with is with a fearful, avoidant attachment style, because she shows symptoms, conflicting feelings about relationships, her both wanting a romantic relationship and being avoidant of that romantic relationship, and also her highly emotional relationships and avoiding relationships when things get too serious, intimate, or emotional. So is that all to Helga Pataki? Well, yes and no, because being a cartoon, we don't get to see the ins and outs of these characters' lives. And with more information, we could clearly understand many of the relationships that these characters have with each other and form a better opinion of their personality and their mental state. But as for right now, that's all we can know and all we can see about Helga Pataki. A character who's always in charge, independent, and aggressive and direct to people around her, which is the cause of her experiences in her early childhood, where she often was overlooked and didn't have a voice, and she could not depend on her family members to take care of her. So to adapt to the situation, she takes charge and does it all by herself.